No mai, haere mai, tēnā koutou, I tēnei ahi ahi. Welcome and good evening everyone. My name is Margaret and it's my role as convener of the Housing Action Group at South Alive to welcome you all here this evening. Thank you for attending this very special evening, which is part of our program of exploring alternative housing options. We started this back in October last year and they've been going really well. Tonight, as you've come to hear about yurts. Yes. First though, some housekeeping. In keeping with level 1 COVID restrictions, I assume you all took advantage of the hand sanitizer at the door, and as you'd booked your places, that is sufficient for tracing, and your name was marked off by Martin as you arrived. In the event of a fire, those in the back room go through the door, and this side go through the door you came in. Those this side clear, you have to be ready to throw them out the door there. Is that okay? The blinds go up and the door's there. The assembly point is the car park over by the wall. Toilets can be found by going down the hall to the right of where you came in. Please don't go into the shop. The alarm makes an excruciating noise. So turn left to the toilets. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold is the order of the day.
Hold what?
Whatever, person next to you. You also need to move away from glass, and we've got an awful lot of it, so down this end and down that end probably. When the shaking stops, we'll reassess the situation. For your information, the presentations will be filmed, that's the camera here, and will eventually appear on a YouTube channel for South Alive. You, the audience, will not be filmed, so that mitigates any potential privacy issues. Our group has always wanted to bring this series free of charge to you. We started back in October last year, as I said, and at that time many people told us they were so good we should charge. But we've resisted that because we want to have this available to everybody. But we would welcome a koha if you feel inclined, and there's a jar on the supper table. Which brings me to my next question. We're always assessing the best way to get our message out to the public to say these things are on. So I'd like to do a little survey, just a show of hands, and you can answer more than once. All right? So how many saw the advertisement in the Express? Okay. On Facebook? More of the same. The poster in the hallway along here? Heard it on the radio? Word of mouth? Oh, we're good gossipers, aren't we? Any other way I've forgotten? No? Okay. We're also running a raffle. As you came in, you saw a raffle of the bokashi composting bucket and the starter pack. Last month's session was about composting, and that was donated to us and generously donated back for this month. Tickets are available tonight, and from South Alive office, which is in that through that wall there, between 10 and 2 each working day. It will be drawn at next month's seminar, so if you're hoping to win, you better be here. But if you're not here, we'll get it to you.
By that reasoning, the next raffle should be a yurt.
It should. Who's going to donate it? Sounds like it's you. And finally, please raise your hand if this is the first time you have visited this venue. Oh, there's always a dozen. Welcome, 1,000 welcomes. On tonight's topic, the format is that we will watch a YouTube video and then I'll introduce each of the speakers in turn. There'll be an opportunity for questions after each speaker, but we ask you to wait till the end of the presentation before you ask those questions. We'll wind up with a cuppa and hopefully finish the evening by around 9:30 because the automatic alarm comes on shortly after that. Okay, any questions? Great. Maria?
We saw it this time in the Express. Has it always been in the Express?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, everyone has been in the expo. It was in a particularly good spot. It was just under your thumb on page 3.
Not always in that spot then.
No, no.
Had a good picture. Had an interesting picture.
Had an interesting picture. Yes.
I just wanted to say too, you asked about radio. I didn't hear it on the radio, but somebody told me that they'd heard about it on the radio. That from that they took that the walls are 100 mil thick or something like this.
Well, let's find out.
There you know that someone did hear it on the radio.
Thank you. My daughter heard it on the radio and she told me, so that was great. And her daughter's here tonight to see it. Right, without further ado, Marie, it's all yours. Do we have to turn the lights down?
No, it should be all right.
Okay.
It'd be better if you did that.
2 years ago, we gave up our jobs and our house in London in order to find a life that was more deeply connected to nature. These days, we're raising our 2 children in a yurt in a forest in New Zealand, and we're so glad we're doing it. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but for us, it's exactly right. We used to live in London in an old Victorian terrace house, made of bricks. It had 3 bedrooms. I worked for Oxfam, which is a big NGO, and my husband was a youth worker. So we had a pretty full-on life in London, and we did love it. But when we had our second daughter, we kind of realised that we were hankering for something else. There was a part of us that had a real longing to be more in touch with the wilderness. We had a lot of stuff in London. We had managed to fill the entire house, mostly with retro second-hand junk, and we kind of didn't want to leave it all behind, so we got half a shipping container and filled that with our most precious junk. Some of that stuff I look at around our place now and I think, why did we bring that all the way from England? But it's really, really hard to make those decisions, and it was too much of a challenge to not bring anything. But most of our stuff we sold in a big open home day. Over the course of that day, hundreds of people came through and walked off with all of our stuff. Honestly, I didn't find the move scary at all. Even though we didn't have a job to come to, we didn't know where in New Zealand we were going to live, we didn't know anything about what our New Zealand life would look like. We just saw the whole thing as an adventure. I think that's a little bit to do with our personality type. We kind of close the door on one thing and then we're just all guns a-blazing into the very next thing. So that was the attitude we turned up in New Zealand with. The first thing we did within a week of arriving in New Zealand was to buy a big, beautiful bus. We then all jumped in the bus and toured around the North Island of New Zealand looking for a town that captured our hearts. Pretty much within 10 days, we'd found the town. So we've got 2 yurts. Our first one is 5 metres big, and we lived in that for 18 months, and it was really cool and really beautiful, but we did want to go bigger. So we kept that one, and now that one is on Airbnb, and now we live in one that is 50 square foot altogether, and that one came from America, and it has real windows that are double glazed and you can open and shut them, and they have mosquito nets inside, and it's got 2 proper doors, and it just feels quite a lot more substantial than our little one. The things we loved about yurt living were the roundness of it. Something feels really peaceful and almost verging on sacred when you're living in a round space. We also loved that it's only a really thin canvas with some insulation between you and the outdoor world, so you're really involved in the elements. We also love that yurts are affordable and that they're beautiful. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a tour of our big yurt. So right now we're standing in the front entrance. So then you walk in the door here and you've got a choice. You can come into our dining room. This is where we tend to eat, just there. and we keep our cups and saucers and things, and we also have a very unfunctional kind of bookcase thing that's made out of an old liquor cabinet. But as you can see, it's a little bit messy. So quick walk into our kitchen. We currently cook by gas, but we're hoping to change that because obviously it's not a very helpful thing from the earth, and we'd rather cook with a renewable energy source. In the winter we can use our fire, and we really love cooking on the fire, and we can have an oven, but in the summer it's just primarily the stove top. We get water from our stream, so that's really handy. We can just tap into that, and it's heated when we light our fire. So behind me you can see my little collection of pots and pans, which I just can't resist picking up in the op shop, which is a second-hand store for Americans who are watching. And this just behind me here is our bedroom. We started off upstairs in a mezzanine, but quickly found that we felt just a little bit exposed up there, too close to the ceiling, and kept bumping our heads. So then we made a little room underneath the mezzanine, and we currently sleep there. It's not perfect, like we intend to put bunks in there and make it a little bit more useful with better storage. And this is where we spend a lot of our time. This is our lounge area. So there's lots of seats here. We love to have people over and hang out and have parties. And there's also my little desk where I do all of my work. Now, living in a yurt isn't completely challenge-free. It is one big open space, so it can be tricky if you've got a few families over and the kids want to play really noisy games and the families want to have a very serious conversation. We also did used to sleep upstairs in our mezzanine, and then changed our bedroom to be downstairs under the mezzanine, and that was because of how loud the weather can be. So you'd be lying in bed and you'd actually wake up because of the wind flapping across the roof or the rain pouring. I'd say those are probably the two big challenges of yurt living. The rest of it we love. I love the big space. I love being able to chop veggies for dinner and still have a conversation with my children in their playroom. I just like that all of our lives, all of the members of the family's lives are completely intertwined all day long. I realise that would drive some people crazy, but I love it. When we left London, we knew that we wanted to focus on my freelance writing more intensely. So over the last few years I've been building that up, and I've written a few ebooks, and I have a YouTube channel, and I have a couple of columns that I write for magazines such as The Green Parent in the UK. So we've been able to arrive at a place where I can work from the yurt using our Wi-Fi connection, and that feels really special that we can do that. We also supplement our income with our little yurt being on Airbnb. And our plan for the future is to do more farm-based activities as well. So my husband works on the farm mostly. We split the parenting exactly in half. So I do 3 days a week work and he does 3 days a week work, and then we do full-time parenting on the other days. We have a herd of Highland cattle. We also plan on maybe specialising in a certain crop, maybe garlic, and selling that to local restaurants. A typical day for us starts very, very slowly. We are unschooling our children, and one of the real bonuses of that is that we don't have to rush off and be anywhere at the crack of dawn. So we use that to our full advantage. We will often stay in bed until 8 or 8:30, and we'll have a cup of tea in bed, and the girls will get busy with some random things. They also get half an hour of internet watching in the mornings while me and Tim have our coffee and breakfast and figure out what we're going to do with our day, because every day looks really quite different. Unschooling is pretty cool because you just support your children with whatever it is they would like to do. In the future, I don't imagine they will want to share a bed with us. They might not even want to share this space with us, and we imagine maybe building them some tree houses or getting them their own little yurt so that they can have a kind of little hub just off this main yurt when they're older and ready for their own space. We feel really fortunate that we were given a chance to live in a yurt and live off-grid for a full year before completely committing to it. We got to see the downside of living in a yurt, and we got to see how hard it can be trying to sustain yourself and your family in an off-grid situation. Anybody that I speak to who is considering this change in lifestyle, I ask them to try and achieve the same thing. Try and keep your eyes peeled for an opportunity to live for a few months with solar energy or in an interesting earth build or whatever it is you're thinking about doing for yourself. Try and find an opportunity to really try it out and really discover the dark side of it. It can be really formative in your choices.
Well, let's set the
Running's
scene.
the best.
Let's set the scene for us. So, obviously we can't ask her questions, but they may have raised questions in your minds which you may get the answers for from somebody else. So now I've got Adam. Adam and his wife run a small family business dedicated to making beautiful individual spaces suited to individual needs with attention to detail. Got this off your website. They live in a yurt.
Sounds fantastic.
It does, doesn't it? They live in a yurt with their family and understand the needs of yurt dwellers, but I'll let Adam tell his story.
Thank you.
Good one.
How do I mind screen? At the top, there's a present button. Present?
Present.
Present. We are present.
Well, thank you for coming along. I'll have to speak up. We lived in a yurt for a year so far, and we'll be back in a yurt one day soon. We were pushed out of our rental at a time when we had a small baby and a toddler, and the best option for us, and we believe the best option for many people, is and was a yurt. And the evidence for that I'm about to share with you. This is not a typical Mongolian, well, this is a hand-drawn Mongolian gear, as they call them over there. And this is what comes to mind when people think of these things, is the ancient form, the well-tested, almost evolved structure that has been tested by the elements of probably one of the harshest environments that there is on the planet. Not just that it's freezing cold, that there's practically no trees where these things are generally put, but also that they have such mixed weather, and they have wind and hail, and every, they have 4 seasons in a day, or not even 4, 3 seasons in a day, and for that reason, the people and the animals and their dwellings are incredibly well selected for evolutionarily. And so what we know of as the Mongolian gear is, some say, near on perfect for what is needed in that spot. Is that the spot we are? Well, also, these are not ancient. These are very relevant. And today, in Mongolia, there are millions of people living in these. And they're generally about the same design. They're well honed, partially by industry, partially by the environmental conditions, to be about a certain size, about a certain shape, and even the inside of each one is laid out practically in an identical way. And this, as a form, has been an inspiration for many, many structures across the planet that claim and aspire to mimic or replicate or just appropriate the good things about this design that have evolved. And with it, a whole culture and a way of living, including how to do furniture, which is very, well, we'd see it as sort of standardised, but it's been tested over thousands of years, and the need to move as the nomadic herdsman culture that it was has resulted in this incredible collection of technologies that are super appropriate for low energy, high efficiency lifestyles in a super demanding climate. And again, very modern living in Mongolia. You know, that people, life changes, times change, job, you need to shift, you need a new job, and you head across town, and it's just as relevant over there today as it ever was. And yeah, there are a number of organisations and companies that are still striving to develop and hone these technologies and these systems to make these people's lives work in an ever-changing landscape, which, as we know now, is not quite the herding, primitive society that it was, or primitive on the land, let's say, sort of system, where now they're being encouraged by pressures, environmental and economic, to move into the cities, which is happening in a massive way. So across the world, these structures have inspired architects, they've inspired DIY craftsmen and all kinds, and they're everywhere, practically everywhere that people have an eye for design. This is in Canada, the company that makes these much more reduced, fine style designs that are used for all kinds of reasons, some glamorous, some practical. We've got a lot in the UK which are produced that have a particular, and you know, they're connected to not just the Mongolian tradition, but also there's a tradition of the Turkic people, and so there's all sorts of influences of these on these yurts. The UK produces beautiful yurts in its various forms for events, as much as living. There's many people living in yurts over there, and these kind of things. This is a cool island cluster wetland. I think it's in Wales. I'm unsure right now, but you know, yurts are a fantastic thing, and they've been taken by many people as an opportunity for this kind of thing. A more American style yurt. Americans have a particular flavour of yurt that some in the yurt world would put them down in a way, because they've avoided some of the ordinary dynamics of what made a yurt originally. So the ways of bolstering, of increasing the number of heavy members in the design and things like that, which you wouldn't, they're not in theme so much as some of the finer designs you see around the world. But they appeal to the consumer because they look sturdy. And we as Westerners are used to seeing a sturdy, strong, rigid structure as the peak of security. But and I'll get into that soon, as to the complications of that. This is in Tasmania. There's a company here that makes and holds events in these kind of simple yurts. And New Zealand has a fantastic tradition already of yurt building, and we've got some really great companies that are functioning today. This is from the far north, and these guys, Life Space Yurts, Luxor, he does custom individual designs that are fantastic, and top notch yurts being made there. That's the inside of one of his. There is a second-hand market for yurts that's quite a developing thing too, because they do last a long time, particularly where they're cared for, and they generally are. This is a Jaya yurt, and they're probably the prominent yurt maker of this country. Their designs are very close to, or they've kept quite as close as you can really do to a traditional design, with certain elements like the flap on top rather than a clear dome, and things like that, which are design choices that are actually well justified by the tradition and by the engineering. But yeah, this is the kind of yurt that we lived in for a year. This one here, now, I've forgotten who made this yurt, but it's another example of just there are some fantastic craftsmen out there making yurts to a high quality. And you see these on Airbnb and even around the place. Multiple yurts, brilliant. We lived in a single yurt. We were lucky enough to be near some other dwellings, including a house and another huge yurt, which is an opportunity for our kids to, run and play and give us some time alone. But this is something I recommend for our culture to step into yurt dwelling. It is a big step to go from a multi-room house into a single, without a lot of introspection and reflection on who and what we are as a culture. Again, great choice. 2 yurts. It works well. This is a project, a backpackers, I think they call it, and it's near Wanaka. I think they've got 6 yurts of different sizes. Each comes out to be a bedroom and a central amenities block. So it's a really good use for a yurt in that some of those facilities that aren't used all the time and can be shared are, and it's quite an appropriate thing to do. They've included these shelters over the doors, which you wouldn't see in Mongolia generally, but in New Zealand, something along those lines is a must, just for the time the time waiting when you knock on the door and you're waiting to be let in. Just it gives you a bit of a reprieve and a bit of a drier head. This is the first yurt that we put up. It was a Mongolian 12-meter diameter yurt, which would in Mongolia be considered probably a palace yurt. It's not a home. It's huge, and we came up with a novel way of putting this thing up where we didn't have 20 strong Mongolian men to help with the lift. We had 4 or 5 of us, but a lot of extra sticks and rope. So specifically for us, yurts, are they appropriate? Yeah. From our experience living in a yurt, warm, dry, comfortable, warm, quite warm. The thing about yurts is that they're really warm. We got the smallest fire that we could really, at the time, we got the smallest fire on the market that was a clean air sort of model. And whenever we cooked, which we did, we cooked on the fire, we had to open the windows, and if it wasn't raining, we'd open the flap at the top because it really was hot. Shelley likes it hot. I like to lie on the floor. It actually is not. It's not the concern with a yurt. Being warm, being dry, being happy. Those are not issues in this kind of dwelling. That's us. It's frosty, but these times were warm times for us. Since then and before then, we were in rental accommodation, brilliant Western style housing, damp, cold, everything that you'd expect or that we imagine other cultures are experiencing. But yurts are really they're striking in that way, that they are so comfortable. Of course, they're not always comfortable because the climate, and that's something to consider with these. As much as any house, the climate is a big factor, and the weather. But snow, yes, snow is just a design consideration. Large trees, well, what can a house handle in flood? I'd say a yurt would do much better in a flood than a house, for the fact that could easily be dried out, hung on the line, and maybe fix a few sticks and then be away again. They're pretty resilient in that way compared to the kind of technology we use for our general housing stock. Plus you can move them. When you see the flood water coming, unless you've got a lot of stuff, a simple living person could easily move their whole life within a day or less if you really needed to. So this is kind of the general thing. What I think is the most important to consider. Moisture and insulation. There are two schools in a way of yurt building. One PVC and plastics, bubble wrap, foil, these kind of things, which are modern materials that on face value are waterproof and they last a long time, and they do provide the security that you need from these elements, from moisture, but the nature of the yurt, and in particular that they tend to have few openings for airflow, one of them being the top. They do run into trouble. I mean, a human or a family of humans in these is breathing and cooking and sweating and running around and all that, and that is the major concern with a yurt. It's not from the outside. It's the respiration that is the main thing. So canvas yurts have the advantage of being able to let moisture through in a way that PVC yurts just can't. In America, they have a lot of trouble with this. The solutions tend to be found in ceiling fans, dehumidifiers, making sure you open the windows on a routine basis, and this kind of solution, which they're sufficient. They're sufficient solutions, but a healthy yurt really looks more like a Mongolian yurt than a plastic bag, let's say. In terms of regulations, New Zealand is in a great position right now for yurts. We have now that we've had the 30 square metre rule changed. It's actually a massive opening for us. Not just that. A Mongolian yurt is about 30 square metres. The normal size for a family yurt would be 30 square metres-ish. But also that it's an opportunity for design to be led by this kind of legislation, which, once that is set as 30 square metres, then we can work on the other elements of it, rather than deciding how big or how small, for one thing. But also it's an appropriate size for the kind of timber availability in our country, for us it's been a really positive thing. And that yurts, while they can't come under the 3601 building code, it's an opportunity then for engineers to step up and really understand these things. And that's part of the work that I've been doing is getting some of that platform ready for yurts developing at 30 square metres into the future. And in particular, the number one thing for yurts is wind. That's the big consideration. And as Lucy was saying, that the movement in a yurt, it's unusual. You don't get that in a house generally, and it's normal in these modern yurts. But to make sure that we attend to that properly is very reassuring for people who are living in these things, and people who are building them for sale need to be attending to that really, really well. Because this can happen, and it is a major consideration, especially for us in moving forward into a climate of high energy flow, making sure that our great cheap option for housing doesn't end in regret. That's something that as a collective the industry needs to be working on. And it can be clean. It can just take the roof in some cases, but also it can be just a horrid mess. Now, you observe this yurt, which is, I'd say, an American design. It's got a lot of hardware. It's got everything you'd hope to have in a rigid, good yurt structure, according to that school of design. But you see, it's got brackets. It's got aviation table there. It's a solid structure. and it's a really heavy mess to clean up. So an awareness and an understanding of the way wind does affect these is key to a healthy yurt stock. So our work has been around this. Well, in a way, this is a phenomenon that happens with yurts. They call it corkscrewing, where because of the inherent instability of this particular shape of having, and I must say, in a Mongolian yurt, you'd never see that. You'd never see that because there's leaves that come down like this. But as the Western yurt builders have come in, they've removed everything that they've seen as unnecessary, and they're left with many, many more issues that thousands of years of evolution would have easily weeded out. And so, we do see this kind of thing occurring as a solution to what actually would never be a problem. But we've gone a different direction with our designs, and that is to go with by allowing this twist and going for what they call a reciprocal frame roof. It's in its lowest energy state, let's say, so that it's completely collapsed, and that's where you begin. And that's been a fascinating study in order to, and there's a snapshot of part of the study that I was able to do through COVID. We had our workshop down here in the yurt, and during COVID we weren't allowed to travel to our workshop, because we were based partially up in Dunedin. And so the opportunity was to really study this roof design, and it was well received, and it's parts of it will be soon hopefully published in the New Zealand Timber Design Journal. So it's been a really rewarding process, and just getting some of the understanding around what's going on with these, because there's a lot of narrative around how the wind reacts on these things, and you see online there's forums and things of people discussing, but to actually have a really good sense of this is important. It's such a simple structure, particularly ours, in that it's only got one piece in the roof, so because it's so simple we can really go into depth on that one element, and it's a round structure, so the wind is going to affect it identically from every direction except where the door is, and that's something we've accounted for too. This is something to show, and I've got this little model here, you see, and just to show that where yurts that have these radial designs, when they encounter asymmetrical loads and they have the wind on one side and the lift, any kind of asymmetrical load, that's when things happen, things that you don't want to have happen, twisting and buckling, where this design, while it does encounter different forces, they're incredibly predictable, and so they can be designed for in a much, much more straightforward way, ironically, because every single part of it looks like this. Everything spirals, and for me it's a joy because of that, but it also does make it very easy it makes it easy to understand the flow of every force on the thing. So that's what I've been working on. The thing I've yet to solve is this kind of problem. We won't have this problem in New Zealand. That's a hole made by a bear. They didn't come into the study. That's a kind of a basic. When we began on these designs, this is kind of what we were looking at. Really capturing that reciprocal offset kind of style, and we did everything that way, and we still do. Even my thinking just goes sort of around and around like that, because it's the nature of it. There is no beginning and end to these, and this is our first prototype. It's only this big. It's a half scale of what we did later, and
Sorry.
this is the children in that little yurt. It's just a beautiful space. No matter what scale it's on, it has that beauty. And you'll notice I've written Tasmania here. Every slide.
Ignore those.
Just ignore that. It was a placeholder, and I forgot to take them out of everywhere. It's a beautiful thing at that scale. And here we go. We're getting bigger. These kids are helping. These lattices, that's for a 6 metre yurt. 6 metre diameter, and it ends up being an almost 20 metre wall. And we use macrocarpa, which is a locally sourced macrocarpa, clear, beautiful macrocarpa. And yeah, it's a real joy to do, and it's not actually tricky. Like we're specialist yurt builders, but actually this kind of thing, with good codification or with a good school, could easily produce these things very, very quickly and with minimal skilled labour. And this is like bending them is something that I think is an essential thing for the strength, and there's different ways of approaching it. But again, it's about predictability. Once you've got bent lattice means vertical walls, because each one goes around in a helical fashion. And some yurts will have straight staves, which in a way are stronger in that they're not they don't really have an arc in them. But the predictability of having a bent piece is in that you know it's going to bend out, and like in a Mongolian yurt, where they say the structure is the bones of the yurt, but the wool and the coverings are the muscle. It's quite in contrast to the way that it's treated in some of the modern American style yurts, where it's just very much they'll be analysing it as a naked structure, let's say, and forgetting that it is quite an integrated animal. This is their first one going up in the garage, and again, like a floor. We made this floor. This is an efficient way to make a floor out of. Every two of those comes from a single standard I'm going to say A4 sheet. You know what I mean? A standard piece of ply. So for a material efficient design, it's actually it's proved itself really well. And then there it is on top of the car. We went out to Naseby, partially for the adventure and the holiday, and partially for trying to get some glamour shots of our new yurt. And we had a birthday party in there as well. There's me, proud. I got noticed for my Awesome As report, so I was happy with that. Now so from there, having done that groundwork and been exposed to yurt life, Shelley and I dedicated ourselves to this as our full-time pursuit. And so our first official, as a company, yurt wasn't anything like we expected it to be. It was massive, and it was not for a home. It was, but it was a good test. It was a very good test of all of our ideas, because they were further into a more risky area of engineering than I thought I would be working. There's that's Shelley. So this is it's for a 9 and a bit meter yurt, and it's very heavy canvas what we use for this. So you can imagine how strong Shelley is. And this is sewing inside our other yurt, which is sort of a level up in terms of comfort. We didn't have 9 metres where we were working. We had about 6 metres. So we had to go down to the local school to actually put these things up. Most of the things we do have to be designed and made so precisely because we can't really take the time to assemble the whole thing until it comes together on site. But here we didn't want to take that risk because it was our first. But it went together beautifully. We built a floor system for this. Flooring is a big issue, and not a big issue. Let's say it's a hurdle because it's part of the yurt that doesn't come with the yurt, and there's so many ways of doing it. And there's any number of builders that will put their hand up to do this kind of work. But there are some specific things that we think that should be included in this kind of build. Triangles, they work really well, for efficiency of material, but also just they're in theme. It really helps that there's a kind of integrity to these things. But we also included in this design a notch sort of system, a locking system, so that when you put the lattices up, they lock into place, and you know it's secure, and you've done it right, and it's not going to move, which is not the case with many yurts. That there's definitely an organicness to them, and that's something we wanted to attend to. And a kind of a dome. We made a dome of the same style, using the same mess that I worked with, which this is the build that we did. Rammed piles was the solution we used for this one. And there.
What kind of soil did you have then? Why did you use rammed piles?
Why?
Yeah.
Availability of tractors with a big thumping machine. That kind of thing is to me it's a very important thing. This is a neighbour of the people, so it's kind of just using what's available, what's appropriate to. Plus you can remove them and move it if need be. So just playing with the how permanent and how movable we can make these things. And and it came together. None of these pieces had come together, and I'd cut them and made them myself with a big projector I'd made, and incredibly it went so smoothly, so brilliantly to plan, that when it all came together, there was just this fine geometric, every mathematician's dream really, but also many nights of lost sleep, wondering whether it was going to. The style of yurt that we make doesn't have a centre ring. It doesn't have a tunnel, as they're called. And so the roof is made of one component. The structure, at least, is one component repeated, which to me is a beautiful thing. Initially, you have to prop up the first few, but after a while, the load that you have to carry tapers off, and it's quite easy to do by hand. One or two people can do this quite easily, and not a single person was hurt. I didn't squash a finger or anything. It was a miraculous thing what happened there. And part of this design was, at the time, thinking that people would want to make their own door, but maybe not. We ended up making this door, and having a system. I think about these systems that future-proof the yurt, so that it can be adapted or joined or swapped out when changes need to be made, and that the door itself could be done by a more typical craftsman, and that the parts that are actually integral to the yurt can be done by us as a specific part, and then so that it's not, that they wouldn't have to keep coming back to us if there's any need for change or that kind of thing. Try to liberate the market. Well, we use sheep's wool. It's fantastic. It's healthy. It's nice to use. It's easy to work. And how thick is the wool on one of these yurts? 100 millimeters. We ended up changing from thick, big panels to smaller individual strips, which just, again, it's about making it more easier to do for somebody putting these up, and getting away from the specialised. That's just part of the process. And windows, putting in windows.
Is there any insulation on the walls or floor?
Not on the floor.
On the floor.
But there's a box cavity
So
space.
that's just a hollow box.
People at the back can't hear your question, so can you wait till the end?
Sure.
Thank you.
There's our prototype brand new window. Curved windows was actually quite a good project to do. It tends to be flexible vinyl windows is one option, or building rigid frames for glass is the other one that tends to be the way to go. And we really believe somewhere in between. And these curved windows work brilliantly. One issue that yurts do have is if the windows or any vinyl or PVC touches the lattice or any wooden component, then you get a moisture condensation zone and deterioration will happen. So those don't touch really. And that's the dome coming together again. Like it's just many individual pieces identical forming these things, and in a way it's to allow for mass production or upscaling of these kind of designs really quickly. And it's just triangles and sticks. It's just simple geometry that, if done accurately and really and at a high precision, these are quite easy to design and build straight from the theory. There's that's a view through it all. This one is a very light space and it's warm on a sunny day. It hasn't the Mongolian yurts don't have windows. They have a flap over the top which they use to regulate the humidity and the temperature and the light. But they can be a cave when they want them to be. Our expectations are different in that we love glass, we love light, and it's part of the building requirements too, is to have enough to make a healthy space for your mind as well as your body. But yeah, just showing that's not a cave. And that's some handsome chap standing in front of a completed thing. So this is too big. It's just too big. Every part of it needs reasonable strength, and it needs some expertise to put it up. The kind of yurts that we're designing now and the ones that we want to be to be brought forward as a solution are definitely 6 meters across, 30 square meters, for all of those reasons, to be light enough to be put up by whoever wants these, and to be able to be moved. Like the time this era of uncertainty demands, I believe, yurts and other dwellings that can be rapidly deployed and also moved if need be, because things are changing. And this is one solution to attending to that. Are there any questions?
It's my line.
Oh.
Questions? Have you got another one?
I've had my share.
Thank you. In the corner there.
Very fascinating. About the, you emphasized that it is nice and warm. Can you expand on that a little bit? Building science behind that and what's contributing to that, and structure of the wall. The blanket insulation that we saw earlier, is that the wall insulation?
Oh yeah, the wall has the same wall insulation, 2.4 R rating. I mean, just in general, we know that a round shape has the least surface area. So in terms of that, just the basic convection losses is low for a shape that has the least surface area, for one. Also, that the solar gain, particularly on this kind of design, is really high, because it's completely insulated, and it depends on the habits of the people in it, of course, too, because with the top open and flow of air out, there is heat loss, but what's been found through studies in Mongolia is that the humidity loss is much higher than the temperature loss at those times. So it means that it's a dry space, which is much easier to heat as well. In terms of heating, this isn't a good example so much because it has no heating source other than the sun. But when you do have a fire in a yurt like this, it is hot.
Is there any condensation that's built up within, inside of the wall framing?
No. There is in terms of there can be high humidity, but wool has a very good dissipation of moisture, as well as that each of these layers is does allow moisture to move through.
Is it
So even
because
though
the canvas is dissipating the any moisture within the wall?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So whereas a PVC layer, for example, would be it is a source of when the outside is cold and there's warm moist air on the inside, that's where it will condense. I didn't show, but the windows themselves have a feature that there's a airflow comes in through the bottom of the window and then up. So the windows are a source of condensation. Pretty much always in there you'll find that.
Thank you.
Tony?
Yeah, it was just if you could expand a wee bit more on the how it copes with the wind. I think that would I can get the other aspects, but of course we can get some fairly decent winds.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That is, I think, the most interesting part of these structures, and that, for me, because it's a critical thing for collapse in this case. The studies that we generally are looking at for the roofs of conical dwellings, we'd be looking at what was done for silos, round silos with conical roofs, and that's quite informative in terms of what happens and what the how that balances on the roof. Lift is the big one. It's the lift, not the drag. The drag is very balanced actually on a conical roof. About this, like 27 degrees is about the cutoff. Steep yurts, which you can get quite steep yurts. They're beautiful. They're roomy and they're like a cathedral, but they do have the additional asymmetrical loading on them. But yeah, it's a complicated topic, and that's my life's work from here on. Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, I hope that's
Okay.
so when you wrap obviously the insulation between what looks like two layers of canvas, there's no wicking of moisture from the outside into the insulation when it's raining?
Oh yes, there is minimally, especially at the very beginning, like when rain, the first rain of the season, for example, there is a swelling that happens
in the fibres of
in the
the
fibres.
outer layer.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely
like a
is.
boat, if you like.
Yeah, in many ways it's like a boat.
And the other thing is obviously you live in a rural environment, you have to have a water supply, and of course a yurt doesn't have a gutter, therefore no tank.
Yeah, that's right.
Turn the roof upside down,
Yeah,
Funnel under
you're right. I mean,
the
they can be fitted. Some yurts do have gutter systems. Yeah.
Okay, question here.
I was just thinking it might seem obvious why you're putting them on piles in a solid floor versus the traditional ones. I would assume they're probably on the ground, rocky surface or something like that, covered with animal skins or mats.
Yeah.
I guess most of New Zealand is wet soils. Is that?
Yeah,
primary
it's a lot to do with it. I think there's an expectation culturally too of our first yurt that we lived in. At the time I was a timber machinist at Pankhurst Sawmilling out there, and my bright idea, which was actually a good idea, I believe, was putting a sawdust floor in, and that was superb. But not everyone's cup of tea, and having your clothes covered in sawdust all the time, it's just a cultural thing. But yeah, there are solutions. I think moisture is the thing though, and for efficiency. If you're in the space for a long time and you're continually heating it from a central fire, then the ground will dry out. Especially Mongolia is high up, very high up, and it's much drier than here. But yeah, some places I'd say you could quite easily.
It travels around other parts of Asia and that they generally a hot climate. Dirt floors, water them down, sweep them out. They're really pack hard. Yeah, and they're clean. They're not dirty clean.
Question there?
With the yurt, can you use like a standard foundation, like concrete foundation or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
They've been used really well in that way. Even in Dunedin, they've at the Rudolf Steiner School up there, they put a number of yurts on solid concrete foundations, and they're really quite good. There's some up near Raglan also that have done that with also integrated heating coils and there's some tidy solutions. Yeah.
Okay, one last question. Yeah.
How does the Southland Council view?
We've got the Invercargill City Council planning person here tonight, so hold that question.
Okay.
I think we'll leave it there because we've got Pete waiting on the screen to talk to us shortly. So thank you, Adam. That's really great. Our last one is another, I don't know anything about this gentleman. His name is Pete, I know that. He's a yurt dweller from Wellington, Victoria.
No, Wellingtonians didn't answer.
Oh, okay, we're not having
I
Wellington.
think they have their yurt in Marvellous.
Oh, okay, Marlborough Way. Yep. Righty-ho, Maria's trying to find him. Probably gone to sleep because we're a bit late.
I'll make some small talk.
No, I wouldn't be able to shut them up afterwards.
What's Adam's company name?
Tree Cozy Yurts. Tree Cozy.
Tree Cozy. I've been advised that it's supposed to be tea cozy.
It's inspired the thought of a warm tea cozy.
A tea cozy, yeah.
Pete, we can't see your video.
There we
Oh,
go.
here we go. Now it's gone.
Right, Pete. Hello.
Hey, how are you all?
Very well, thank you for waiting. I hope you've had a good cup of coffee. Now, I know nothing about you. My name's...
I've been listening to your...
You've been listening?
I have been listening in on your conversation and the presentation, so
Didn't know that.
great to hear everything.
Okay, so we don't know anything about you, Pete. I'm going to let you tell your own story.
Alrighty. Hi, everybody. Adam, great conversation there. I'm Pete, based in Martinborough, New Zealand, down in the South Wairarapa. I'm a representative for Colorado Yurt Company in the South Pacific. So our yurts are what Adam was talking about, the Northern American yurts. I have been living in a yurt for 4 years, a Colorado yurt, and hopefully you may see a little video clip before the end of the night of our own yurt. It is on Airbnb as well. I moved out in a matrimonial situation but kept it. So just going on some Adam stuff and Lucy. Lucy's a lovely lady. I've spoken with Lucy on several conferences before. The Northern American yurts are a little bit away from the traditional Mongolian yurts like Adam's talking about and things like that. I guess just listening to some of your questions that you had about moisture, one gentleman was asking about that, someone's asking about platforms, and then someone was asking about council, and I believe you have a Southland Council person there. The Colorado yurts, we represent a representative, BlueMountainYurts.com, which we cover the South Pacific. Ours are can be fully consented and are very durable, and we have the PVC style different to their canvas. I guess there's pros and cons for both yurts, and there's a market for every yurt in the world of whoever's making them and the manufacturers. So I think if you get a chance, examine yurts completely before you make a decision. I took 2 years before I purchased my own yurt, which is a 9.14 metres, the biggest yurt that we have. We have 5 sizes. So I heard Adam talking about the new building code of being anything under 30 square metres. That's definitely fine as long as you're not putting electrical and plumbing into them. You can use them as a bedroom. You could use solar for your electrical side of things. Our own yurt runs on solar with some automotive cable and some day-car lighting, LED strips with some dimmer switches. So you can live as simple as you want and as modern as you want. Originally I came from a 4-bedroom house, ensuite, 2 living areas into first 6x3 board and batten with a caravan, and then moved into our yurt. We didn't actually unpack any of our stuff from our house. We just lived with what we had that we brought, bed, things. And it's quite amazing how you can live so simply in a yurt and how calming they are. And I guess Adam and your wife and your family would understand how calming a yurt is and how relaxing. And I guess looking at the audience here, there's all ages, and I guess Adam and myself would quite easily say all ages are looking at yurts, from affordability, durability, and change of lifestyle. And I can tell you, if you really want to change your lifestyle and live really simply for 15, 20 years or however many years you want to do it, I'd recommend a yurt. You probably hear through my voice very passionate about yurts, and as Adam and his family making them as well. So there's definitely worth looking at the traditional modern Mongolian yurt canvas versus the PVC yurt. Ours is the PVC 3-layer vinyl system mold-you UV protected. Pro-Check walls, it's a product, Endurolast, which is a lot heavier product on the roof. I can remember Lucy saying that you hear the flapping noise. That's correct, only until you get used to it. You guys might have heard that too, Adam. It's like living next to a train station or a main road. You get used to the noise after a while. Wind factors, I heard a lot of conversation about that. The modern yurt, definitely of Colorado Yurt Company, rates up to 115 k's, which is around 150, 160 k winds they'll handle with a wind package. And yes, I've seen yurts that Adam was showing have been torn inside out. And I think a lot of people would go, well, why would I want a yurt? But if you actually have them fully engineered, which the Colorado Yurt companies are fully engineered and have passed New Zealand engineering tests with another engineer from New Zealand, you can get them through council pretty easily. We have a representative, an architect, which cover the whole of the South Island, North Island. We have one right down on the far south west coast of the South Island, and that is fully permitted now. So it took a little while to get through because as Adam and his family probably understand that a lot of councils and that don't understand the structure of a yurt. You'd probably agree with that, Adam. And it takes a lot of people to need to actually go inside a yurt and understand what they are. I think most consenting is done in Dunedin now for yurts throughout New Zealand, actually. So it's quite interesting. The South Wairarapa Council used Dunedin to consent yurts. So just in a nutshell, that's who I am, what we do. We're passionate. We've got a lot of yurts being manufactured. So have a look at the video if you get a chance. I think they're going to run. I've just done a little 2-minute video of our own yurt. But if you ever want a no obligation chat about yurts, I'm always here for you. You can get us directly on Pete at bluemountainYurts.com or my number. I can always email that to you. But if you have any questions you want me to answer from a modern side of yurts, which are the Northern American yurts, which we double glazed windows. We have the standard windows. We have log fires in our yurts. Our domes open. Feel free to give us a chat. I'm not quite sure when you're going to run the video, but yeah. If you have any questions now, free to.
Background of Steph and Jonathan.
We're going to run the video when?
For the background of Steph and Jonathan, because it doesn't have sound.
It doesn't have sound. Okay. So
Yeah,
Pete.
no, it doesn't have sound now, so really.
Okay, so we're going to run it while we have our next speaker. Jonathan, are you speaking tonight?
I wasn't intending to.
Jonathan, you're up next.
Why don't I come up first?
Okay, are there any questions of Pete before Jonathan comes up?
Can I ask, not just Pete, but both? I haven't heard anything you mentioned about the bathroom and the sleeping room.
Ablutions.
So how in this big circle, one room, you separate those very important facilities?
Thanks, Victoria. There's a lot of nodding going on. People weren't game to ask the question. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah.
Go.
Not in the yurt.
Not in the yurt. Right, down the creek?
I would say in a yurt. I would say you can. We have a lot of clients put their bathrooms, their kitchens all inside a yurt, and you're worried about the steam, the moisture. We have a stovepipe outlet, so you would use an extractor fan exactly like you would in a modern house and extract it out. But the other thing I would recommend if you're having a shower in a yurt is use a shower dome.
Thank you very much for that.
So, yeah, I'm a little bit different from Adam's there. Yeah, sorry, Adam.
That's okay. Diversity. Yes. Right. Mr. City Council planning person, what you've heard tonight.
I like it. I'm going to get one.
When we had the tiny houses team, he came up and said...
I was going to get one of those too. I get a tiny yurt.
He came up here and simply said, I'm convinced.
I don't have to say it again, I'm convinced. I always seem to get asked to come up and speak after people who know tremendously more than me have already spoken. There's not a massive amount I can add to it. It all adds up as far as I can see, and there are some people who've done some pretty spectacular things. One of the things we'll just touch on is around the building consent side of things. We generally have to judge a case, take a case on its merits. We look at what's put in front of us, and we're more than willing to do that. Just needs to comply with the building code. Pretty important to understand that all work has to comply with the building code, whether it requires a building consent or not. Heard a bit of talk about the new exemptions with 30 square metres. Not sure that applies in all cases, particularly if you're intending to live in it. That's usually around an accessory building or a sleep out that's going to be used in conjunction with an existing dwelling. And I'd really encourage you. I know what it's like. I've been on the other side. I've been adversarial with council before. Try not to look at it as ways of defeating the council. Council are there to work with you, and that's what they're required to do. If you strike any strife with council, which you often do, it's always worth having a conversation with them. But what I'd probably say as well, there's a lot more involved with planning, I would say.
Want me to go over the planning, please?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll introduce you to Steph. I'll be around anyway if you want to ask a few questions. But.
Steph, do you want to talk about this?
Yep, I sure can.
Steph's also got her book.
Just in case people ask hard questions.
Steph's from planning at the City Council and Invercargill City Council as well.
Hello. Yes, Stephanie Ellis, Invercargill City Council Planning Department. I am the one that deals with resource consents, me and currently one other, but we're hoping to get one more. So in regards to yurts, like most buildings, they need to meet the provisions in the district plan. They do meet different definitions depending on what you're going to use them for. So a lot of things in planning is based on the intention or the purpose of the building and the future purpose rather than what you're currently building it for. So if you're building it with the intention to live in it and it meets the definition of a residential dwelling, so it has facilities, it has a kitchen in it, you're living in it, you're parking your car, all those sorts of things, it becomes a residential unit. It needs to meet like density. We don't have parking requirements anymore. That is currently being all done with the stuff in the plan, so there's going to be some bits moved around in there. Outdoor living, permeable surfaces, site coverage. Provisions where you are outside of the reticulated system, so you're not connected to sewer and water, different provisions can apply, particularly when it comes to firefighting, because I know that's the ideal to live out in the rural sort of zone. But there is provisions for firefighting. It does depend greatly on size. There is a number of different ways in which you can address it in the New Zealand Firefighting Code of Water Practice. That may not be right, my apologies. It's very close to that though. We do on-site and sprinkler systems, but there's another variation of ponds and drainage that you can use. And if you are interested in doing those sorts of things, I know building matters are slightly different. We are at the council. We're available from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. all weekdays. You can come with a draft plan. That's always easy for us to understand, and an address. If you don't have an address, that's perfectly fine as well. And then we can take a look at it. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent there. But if you're using it as an accessory building, different matters apply then as well. They don't need to have certain aspects in regards to density. If you're using them for accommodation purposes, it changes the activity as well. Whether it's inside of town or outside of town, there's different matters that apply. If you're looking at doing something outside of the city district, you'll need to go speak to one of the other councils as well. But if you come see us, we'll point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Steph.
You said something about the car parking there. So if you build a unit, you don't need a car park. Was that what you said?
To operate a residential activity, you used to require a car park depending on the size of your dwelling. Because yurts tend to be small, you probably only need the one, but there is currently new national policy standards which has removed parking from our district plan. You don't need parking anymore.
For a yurt or a house?
Both. Well, it's whether it's a yurt, a caravan, you're living in a mansion or in an apartment complex. To planning, they're all residential units, and you'll need to meet the certain requirements based on what they are. So if you have a lot of little ones close together, they each need to have those provisions to have amenity to allow for good ergonomic design and all those sorts of things.
Not a park.
Not a car park anymore. But there is provisions in the district plan if you want to place a car park, and you're most welcome to look at the new policy standards that we have.
So that standard's over and above the district plan, is that what you're saying?
It's a national policy standard. I'm not it's new, and I'm not the most well versed in it. There is some people at council which are policy people, and they'll definitely be able to go through it a lot clearer than what I'm explaining right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Steph.
Just one more question. You got limited hours for planning access at the council between 9 and 1
Yes,
p.m.
9 and 1 p.m. You're most welcome to call us at any other time, or you can send us an email. There is resources on our website, including a guide to the residential zones and a mapping system showing you where your zones are, hazards and services. These are not 100% accurate, but they're a good representation of the information we have.
That's a very good spiel. Well done. Thank you very much. Right, well, I'm keeping an eye on the clock.
Does anyone have any questions for Jonathan?
Jonathan's not wanting questions.
No,
That's why I put Steph up. He's the boss. He's got Steph. Okay, so thank you to Lucy and to Adam and to Pete and Jonathan and Melissa. You've given us much to think about. You're going to go home and talk about it. Tell everybody where you came and found out about all this. I'm interested that the architect back there has said nothing, and nor has the architect sitting here. You couldn't hear?
No, listening.
Oh, okay.
Getting my theories on.
So lots of good quality questions. So thank you for your presentations. Next month we'll bring again something a little different. It will be about living in a modern village, and particularly the one planned for Kew Bowl, which is dear to the heart of South Invercargill people. Watch out for the advertisements in the Express, not guaranteed to be page 3, but it will be here on Tuesday, August the 17th. Don't forget about the raffle. Tickets will be available in the South Alive office every working day until they're sold, and will be drawn here, I think I said, in August. So, chat amongst yourselves. Make use of the muffins and the hot water and coffee and tea and sugar that's out there. Talk amongst yourselves. and we might see you next month. Thank you very much.